myself and Clive, you've got Charles, you've got Craig, you've got Keith, you've quite a few members that you don't even recognise. We've all owned Picos and we've been using them. So we just come along to the meeting just to sort of see if you give any plans and pieces. So that's
when you're finished.
Exactly. The answer hasn't changed.
When you're finished in here.
Can you bring the giant jigsaw piece back to where it belongs?
Hi, Oshin.
Evening, folks. Hello, Mick. Ain't seen you in a while.
No, not quite a while, eh? Been a bit busy, mate.
How's the new house?
Yeah, we've still got no heating in the new part of the house. All the underfloor heating's down, but I've got an engineer coming tomorrow to help me with the wiring of the control panel.
Oh, God.
Yeah, there's 100 wires going all over the place and for all the valves.
So I don't know how many people we're expecting tonight, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. 23 people asked for the login link, as well as all the normal members. So this could be a busy one.
just to shout out, Darren, thank you very much for the password. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so
on the sound.
Sound is a little over.
Bye-bye.
I'd stop at you.
Nice hat, Clive. Thank you very much for the Pico the other day.
In this phone, his face is so.
Right, give it a few more minutes before we get started. Just checking no one's tried to get in contact on Twitter or Facebook. I always forget to check them until the last minute.
Blimey. Evening all.
How do I turn you up?
I don't think I've ever had pages in Zoom before.
Hi, Lee.
Popular man, Ian.
No pressure at all. Grimy.
Evening, Ian, as well.
Hi, Ian.
Hey.
You've got a big audience tonight.
I didn't even know Zoom did pages. Blimey. Oh, crikey.
Still going up as well.
How many are we up to now? 32.
What's your magic number to start, Darren?
I think we'll start now, to be honest with you.
12.
Say again?
About 12 would be good.
Yeah, I think we're slightly past that. Cool. Welcome to the December lab meeting, folks. It's going to be a busy one because it looks like Ian's a popular man. Be a bit too many people who haven't been before to do new members. How many we got? Hands up if you've never been to a lab meeting before. Jesus Christ. Lucas, put that hand down. Okay, there's not too many people. Okay. So yeah, first part of the meeting, we generally just all the new people introduce themselves. First name, background of what your brewing history is and what you're interested in. Shall we start with Pete? Because you're at the top of the screen.
Did you say Pete? Yeah. Yeah. I've been brewing for nearly 50 years. Wines, beers, spirits, you name it. What hasn't been tried, I've never tried. I've tried the whole works, but I'm always open to suggestions for other brewers that have got more experience than myself. And when I got the opportunity to come on here, I just jumped at it.
Cool. Welcome along. Clive even?
Right, yeah, I'm Clive. Been brewing for the last 30 odd years. Some of you might know me on JBK underneath the name of Barney. And what I haven't owned is, no, I've owned BMs, I've owned Grainfathers, 3 vessel systems, you name it, I've owned it. And the reason why I'm on here is because we found the Picos and we've already been experimenting with the Picos on a different forum. So we thought we'd just pop along tonight and just sort of see if we can offer any guidance or answer any questions anyone might have.
Cool. Cheers. Charles.
Okay, yeah, I'm Charles Tucker. I've been brewing for just over 50 years. I've got a clone of a Grainfather. I've got a 50-litre BM plus the old traditional three vessel system, although in my case probably a 4 vessel because I've got a larger boiler that I use from time to time. Most of my brews tend to concentrate on typical British beers, particularly like the old-fashioned dark beers, although I do venture from time to time into the Belgian beers. And the reason I wanted to join tonight is twofold, really. I've been living in Greater London, I've been toying with the idea of joining the folks on lab for a while anyway, but the COVID situation sort of knocked that on the head. And secondly, I'm sitting on the fence regarding the Picos. I don't know whether I want one or not. I've been in discussions on another forum with people who've got the Picos. I've still not made my mind up, so I'm hoping the Q&A tonight will convince me one way or the other.
Cool. Cheers. Craig, have you been here before?
Yeah, so I've been brewing about 10 years now, and I'm around on a load of forums as Fubar, but with 00, not the U. So I'm admin on JBK as well, but I know a few of the lab guys. Been watching Clive kind of playing with this, and I jumped in as well. But the Americans who kind of got hold of it don't seem to be wanting to improve things that much. But I know there's a lot of smart brewers on lab, so I'm figuring there might be some interesting exchange of ideas tonight. And plus, once I'd seen the invite, I've been having a look at some of the other videos as well we had online, which was pretty good.
Cool. Cheers. Keith?
Hi, I'm Keith. I'm a member in Norwich Amateur Brewers. I've been brewing for about 10 years. Got a 3-vessel system and a 10-litre tier, and I hacked with a grandfather controller to make small batches on. But that was still a lot of time to do that. So when I saw the Pico on a forum, I jumped at the chance and bought one. So I'm here because of the Pico.
Ben, you put your hand up.
Oh yeah, I've been brewing about 3 years, member of Worcestershire Home Brew Club. So have met a few of the lab lot before in the recent inter-club competition we had. Yeah, normally brew on a 3-vessel system, but was persuaded after a few beers to get a Pico by some of your lab members, which is out of the box and flush, but not brewed on it yet. So hoping to pick up some tips tonight.
Cool. Peter R, I think you're next. Oh, you need to unmute yourself. Okay.
Yeah. All right. That's better. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. My background, I come from the National Association of Wine and Beer Makers. I used to be chairman of that and got various other roles for my sins. Also run the Beds and Hearts beer group. And so I know some of you, Mick particularly, and Lee. So yeah, the Pico thing was, I was asked by the national press about a year ago to sort of comment on it. So I did a bit of research into it. I think my sort of conclusions was it wasn't really brewing as we know it, but so I thought I'd come and see if my prejudices were well founded or not.
Cheers. Ilya? Oh, we can't hear you. No, not working. No worries. Anyone else who's new want to say hello? Oh, Mez.
Hi there, it's Mez from Worcester Homebrew Club. So I joined late, just been putting a little one to bed. And I guess we're talking about why we've got a Pico. So I've got a cast iron Guten 30-litre one, which I normally use, and a cheap, interesting looking gadget that's rather shiny was a bit too tempting to pass up. So I didn't really look into it too much and just took the plunge when I heard that they're going cheap anyway. And I've done a couple of batches so far of Munich Helles and experimenting at the moment.
Cool. Cheers. Sarah?
Yeah, that's my Friday night now. That's actually my wife's account. My name is Brian. This is my first ever meeting with Picos or whatever. And I think I dropped Darren. I think you were a line just a second ago. Come along. I'm based in London. Been brewing probably about 3 or 4 years. And probably the reason I wanted to kind of get involved is to take it to the next level. Really. I've been mainly brewing a bag on pans and tea urns and it's all been a bit amateur. So where else but the London Amateur Brewers to kind of take it to the next level. So that's my background. So yeah, definitely interested in the Pico as well because I just had a look at a few videos online. Looks interesting bit of kit.
Cheers. Well, welcome everyone. Before we get down to the Pico stuff, we normally go through the news. Got a few things to talk about club-wise. So we'll try and get through that as quick as possible, and then Ian can have his. So first off, we normally talk about competitions. Lee, are you still looking for help on the 11 plus?
Oh, yes, please. I'd like some help just with some people to do the social media posts, really, and update the website with our sponsors. So I've managed to get some sponsors. I know what we've got and what they've given. It's just someone to turn that into some text. I think we had quite a lot of the sponsors we probably got a lot of text from before that Serge has got. So a lot of it should be a cut and paste. And then just schedule them in the build up to the competition so that people can see what prizes we've got. I've got a big box of White Lab stuff and Malt Miller and the like. So yeah, just a bit of help really to do that whilst I prepare for the actual comp.
Any volunteers? Dennis, good man.
Good man, Dennis.
You want to catch
I
up?
have to thank Lee for putting me in touch with Clive to get the Pico. So I owe you one. So
payback time.
Excellent. Yeah. Chase, follow up with Lee on Slack and yeah, see what you can do to give him a hand.
Thanks, Dennis.
Awesome. Next I had on the list was Lab Versus. Does Serge or James want to give us a quick update on what's happening? I kind of lost track. It got busy.
So it's interesting you say you lost track. It got busy because actually the club versus club competition got really, really busy. I believe we have 7 pairs, if I'm not mistaken, but it's at least 6. And actually, several clubs, Lab and Rebel, are taking on 2 others. So we have an awful lot of brewers participating, already brewing. Each pair is setting its own timelines for Lab. We're shipping beers for the last week of January to compete against Rebel, and then for mid-February to compete against the Midlands Homebrewing Club. And James did a really nice wheel spin, and we have a range of really good styles, difficult styles, some, and as I have found out, it wasn't easy to brew, and whatever shortcuts and whatnot I've taken to age it quickly will become apparent in a good or a bad way. And I think many of us are in similar positions. So yeah, it's all still steam ahead with that. Once all the beers are sorted out, we'll need to be looking for judges. So expect to be reached out to with an offer of free beer for a bit of your time and some comments. BJCP style, to give feedback to the brewers. And afterwards, we'll be arranging meetups to talk about all the beers brewed. And obviously, each pair is doing that on their own. We're not organizing for everybody. James has built up the framework that we ultimately implemented as a group of homebrew clubs. And yeah, we'll have the meetups, talk about the beers, drink the beers, discuss, and see if who won as a collective rather than as individual people.
Cool.
That's about it for me.
Perfect. So when are they going to kick off, or is it all just wait and see at the moment?
Well, no, everybody's most pairs are already brewing, and Lab and our competitors are absolutely already brewing. There've been some posts from the guys that beers in the fermented, etc. But the start of the reviews, if you will be beginning of February. So to let some beers age and give everybody the time to obviously brew if they can't do it at the moment. And as well know, Christmas is usually a busy brewing time with all the leaves and all the bottle swaps and whatnot.
Yeah. And on the subject of bottle swaps, James, have you been to the postman lots?
Well, eventually I'll get the courier to come to me, because I when we did the first round of club versus club stuff and I handle a bottle swap, I had to carry half of the boxes to the post office, and my back did not thank me for that. Neither did the post office really. So yeah, I've got most of the bottles swapped around. I'm waiting for one box of stuff, and when that comes, I will quickly stick that bottle in each box, and they'll be on their way. So I'm hoping there's a chance you might get your return boxes on Friday. So I'm trying to get it back for the weekend if we can, and then we can start drinking.
Cool. There was a bit of discussion in the Beer Swaps channel. If people want to like arrange like drinking together on some of the beers, chat about it in Beer Swaps, and we can arrange a couple of nights or something. Because yeah, some of the beers aren't going to be ready for a few weeks. Some are drink now, so we could possibly pair up the ones that are ready to drink like in the next few weeks. And if people want to spend an hour going through a few of them, that'd be really cool. And we could like let the brewers know if there's beer's going to be drunk.
Yeah, I mean, one way or the other, feedback on the Beer Swaps channel for everybody, and obviously you can share recipes and things like that on there as well for the beers. That would be good. Just to do a bit of what we would have done pre-COVID in person, to be able to do some proper feedback and yeah, sharing of what you've actually brewed. So thank you to everybody that's taken part. So it looks like a really great list of beers.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to drinking them.
And thank you for sorting all that out. That looked like a mammoth task on Saturday.
Yeah, I by the time I got about 2/3 of the way through, I started to lose the plot a little bit, and bottles were going into the wrong box and things like that. So I ended up with a few odd bottles here and there, and then I had to quickly work through and go, okay, where should this one actually be, and what shouldn't be in this box, kind of thing. So, but we got there in the end.
Awesome. Is Ken around? I can't. There's too many people.
Yes.
There he is.
Hello.
What do you want me for?
Did you go and pick up the books from Ant's wife?
No, she never replied to me.
Oh right, okay. Fair enough.
Might have to give her a nudge.
Okay, cool.
I can't remember who it was that went there the first time.
It was Peter Gale.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if he knows how reliable she is about getting in touch. But yeah, I emailed her about a month ago, 3-4 weeks ago, and didn't hear a single thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. We can follow up with that. All right. I won't ask you about any ideas about how we can share the books around, but
yeah, we'll come to that at some point, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, you can be our resident librarian. It's cool. Okay, couple more things. So probably no surprise, no one uses the forum anymore. I'm going to kill it this month. Anyone complaining? Cool. Safely having to maintain that damn thing. All right, cool.
Does that mean that we're potentially going to lose some things that might need to be migrated somewhere? Is there any blog style posts that actually could be useful and we just don't know about them because we don't use the forum?
I don't think there's that much. It might be worth if people have got chance, spend half hour just looking through it, see if you can find anything that you think's worth keeping, and I'll keep it open till say the end of the month, and then anything that is worth keeping I can transfer to a main blog post on the main website or something like that, so it's kept around forever and ever. Yeah, because Slack's not a good place to put stuff you want to hang around. But yeah, if there's stuff on there that people want to hang around, we can transfer it elsewhere. That's fine. But yeah,
I think there is a huge thread on water treatment that covered pretty much all the bases from about maybe 5-6 years ago, and I think that was the last really big kind of conversation on the forum. So that
that might have mostly been covered by the presentation that James did about 12 months ago or something. But yeah, we can sort of take that and put that elsewhere as well, and compare the notes. Cool. Yeah, that was pretty much about it. So there was some discussion about having a mailing list as well, but as there's so many people, this probably doesn't concern. We'll take that on Slack instead. And yeah, last one. Anyone got any more ideas for talks? Oh, go on, Jack.
Just got one question for Serge, actually. The competitions that we're running in January and February, how much beer must we brew for that? Because mine's going already, and it's I think an 18-liter batch. I just want to know how many bottles do I need, and should it be PET bottles again?
Yes, so I will message everybody the moment I get the time, and apologies, it's been a bit busy with that. Yes, it's PET bottles, and if memory serves me right, we're fielding a team of 8. So if you want to take part in the bottle swap, then you need to send 1 beer for each person, excluding yourself, from both teams. So that would make it 15, plus 3 for the judges. So that's 18 beers total.
Okay.
Right, that's pretty much it for the news section. Anyone got any questions or anything for the group? No. Excellent. Cool. Ian, do we want to go straight into your bit, or did we want to have a quick 10-minute break?
I'm easy if people want to grab a beer and still early doors, isn't it? Or I could stop after 20 minutes and call a break.
Yeah, should we do that? Oh.
Yep, that works for everyone.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, let's do that then. Okay, right. Give us a moment. Leave my beer, which I will inevitably spill. Right. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Right. Okay. Right. So yeah, over the past couple of weeks, I've given quite a bit of thought about what to cover in this talk. Not wanting to completely bore and alienate those of you that weren't daft enough to get caught in the Pico rush and who might not get quite as excited by the detail of how the machine works. But even if you're not ready to see Lee massage his rotary valve, the PicoBrew story it's quite an interesting case study in product development, especially if you've ever been involved in startups or product launches. Just on a logistical note, I'm based in the mountains in Chamonix, and we are at the very end of a very long telephone line. So we've already had a foot of snow this week, and my internet connection is not great. So if I drop out, then someone starts shouting, and I can repeat anything you might have missed. So how's that? Oh, I'm going to change slide. Here we go. What are we going to cover tonight? So first of all, I thought we'd cover a bit about the people behind PicoBrew and what they set out to create. And then on to some of the other products that they developed before the company ran aground at the beginning of this year. The second half of the session is given over to the model of PicoBrew that most of us bought on eBay and how we're brewing on it. And then finally, we should have we should have plenty of time, to be honest, to talk about some of the areas in more detail. For those of you who did take the plunge and have already done a few brews, I know that there are already loads of questions flying around around troubleshooting start hoses and priming pumps, alterations to maximize mash efficiency, building various versions of a DIY Pico pack, and rigging up the local Pico server to trick the Pico into accepting recipes. Luckily, I know that some of the guest Pico brewers here have loads of experience in all of this, so they can help me fill the massive gaps that I'm going to intentionally leave. For me, this began a couple of years ago when I began to feel that I wasn't brewing enough test batches. Brew days on my 3-vessel setup seem to take about 6 or 7 hours, pretty much regardless of whether or not I end up opening a valve when I shouldn't do and spending another few hours cleaning up. So I started looking for a small batch system for testing out hops, malt, yeasts that I wanted to try, and generally recipes that I didn't really want 20 or 40 litres of. A small system which would be quick to brew on, very low effort, especially in terms of cleaning. And so I started looking around at alternative brewing options. Am I still connected? Everyone still hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant, good. Everything went very, very quiet all of a sudden. So I started looking around at what else is out there. Obviously, home brewing's been around a while now, so there are plenty of what I now realize are completely antiquated and redundant techniques. So I now, I started looking around. First of all, I looked at small stovetop batches, but maintaining mash temperature looked a bit fiddly, and I don't have a 70s kitchen or a visor. I had a look at gravity stands for a while to make things easier, but I'm not sure I could do without pumps to move the water around. And I'm not sure I really want to be involved in whatever these gentlemen are trying to measure. I considered other 3-vessel rigs, mainly smaller ones, some more or less Heath Robinson-esque, but all of them meant similarly long brew days. And I looked at outdoor sort of hillbilly style brewing, definitely less mess, but still lots of effort. I don't have a beard or a banjo, let alone a wooden Stonehenge like these guys. So probably the most serious contender, like the Grainfather or the Braumeister or some of the knockoffs. But even there, given the investment I'd need to make versus the time, I was going to say, I don't know, I never really found it compelling enough, even though I'm sure one day I probably will get one. And then one day I spotted a forum thread one night, actually, about brewing units being sold from the US on eBay. Luckily, I'm not easily taken in by these things. So I carefully considered things for 5 or 6 minutes before pressing buy on eBay. And I have Clive and others to blame for that completely. And the more I read on this thread, the more I realized that I probably found the future of brewing. And this vision came in the form of the PicoBrew, the PicoBrew Pro. And this was the kit I realized that with the touch of a button was going to be mashing and boiling and cleaning up all by itself, whilst I sat on the sofa and read the paper. And I got quite excited at this point. I realized I could be brewing every day, probably over breakfast when I was at work, helping the kids with their homework. During lovemaking, probably gone a little too fast there, but I should probably explain a little bit for some of you about what PicoBrew actually is. So who were PicoBrew? They were a team of 3 co-founders. The guy on the left, Bill Mitchell, he's an ex-Microsoft VP, did 18 years at Microsoft, notably in their skunk works. So he was working on PDAs and wearable computing. His skill set was in software development and product design. The second guy on the right there is his brother Jim, food scientist. He spent about 20 years building food processing plants in California. And then the last co-founder that they pulled in was a chap called Avi Geiger, who was also ex-Microsoft. He had a more practical skill set in electrical and mechanical engineering. So his skill set sort of fitted in quite well with the other 3. They were based in Washington, and over a few years they grew to somewhere between 30 and 60 employees, depending on what sources you look at. One of the more notable employees, probably for us, was a woman called Annie Johnson, and she was Pico's brewmaster, tasked with recipe development. She was a home brewer in the States who'd won the 2012 Pilsner Urquell Master Home Brewer. She'd won the AHA Home Brewer of the Year in 2013, and she was a national BJCP judge. So all in all, you know, they look like a pretty good bet really for a startup. So what did they set out to build? Well, the idea was to create the Nespresso of beer, like a miniaturized brewery that would produce beer at the touch of a button. They recognized that the sort of social nature of brewers, so they realized it was essential that the unit was connected to the web, and that they'd be able to make recipe sharing as simple as possible. And one interesting twist on this, which I hadn't realized, was that on their PicoBrew brew marketplace, which lets you publish your recipes and you know, share them, basically every recipe pack that gets sold with every one of your recipe packs, and all of the ingredients packs that get sold, you can earn a royalty on. So it's effectively like an app store for beer, which I thought was pretty interesting. The idea was the product would be unique, and it would constitute defendable intellectual property. And by 2018, the design for the Z series, which we'll come to later on, included 329 unique elements and had 8 patent awards, and it shares, you know, very similar technology and processes with all the other Picos. And then finally, just like Nespresso capsules, the revenue model would come to involve repeat purchases of these consumable packs with ingredients in. So you end up with this sort of hardware plus continuous revenue model. So together with the credible management team, at this point, many would argue they had all the ingredients for a successful startup. Well, nearly all of them anyway. And so what did they develop? So they initially developed proof of concept systems based on an off-the-shelf Arduino-based controller. They used off-the-shelf pumps, relays, valves, and they built a custom heating loop. And they worked on preloading of ingredients, liquid flow paths, and hands-free automation. And the result was the Zymatic, not the Pico that we bought, a bigger unit, a 9.5 litre brewing machine. It uses grain and hops, unlike the Pico. And Bill and the others raised about 660,000 via Kickstarter against a goal of 150 grand. So at this point, Clooney wasn't the only one who could smell something good. In 2012, they moved into a lab to refine the process. And so they focused on mash efficiency, hop utilization, and reliability and repeatability testing. So they brewed hundreds of batches, aiming for consistency and looking for faults, testing recipes. The Zymatic then launched in 2014. It cost $2,000, and it was used and heavily marketed by them as a pilot system for breweries, as well as for home brewers. And even White Labs used them to test batches and brew wort. These days, I think we're probably a bit jaded when the latest 2-pint Brew Buddy Robo thingy gets announced. But back in 2010, they were pretty much one of the first to produce something like this, and it got a lot of praise in food technology and new product reviews. But there was clearly a little of Steve Jobs in Bill Mitchell, and he wasn't content to sit on his laurels. So in 2015, they launched Keg Smarts, which was a kegerator accessory, which gave information like beer level tracking, temperature control, and essential kegerator information like social media updates. In 2016, they launched the Pico, which is now called the Pico, well, for a while was the Pico S and then the Pico Pro, which was effectively a smaller version of the Zymatic that only used these Pico packs. You couldn't use user ingredients. And they ran a Kickstarter campaign for that as well. And they raised 200 grand in about 9 hours. The units sold for $600, and then the packs for $20 or $30. Not a bad lineup for a couple of years' work, but at this point, Bill, it turns out, was only just warming up. So in 2017, they released the Pico Still, which was a distilling accessory for Picos, which allowed you to make spirits. They also then released in the same year the Pico Model C, which was a cheaper, it was only $400, version of the 2016 Pico. It had a plastic body, smaller display, and it had a simpler keg system for people to use. And the Kickstarter campaign for that raised nearly $2 million in just 40 days. So at this point, the product range is still pretty much focused on home brewers and test equipment for brewers. 2017 still wasn't over, and Bill decided to knock the product out the door. This time it was the Pico Firm. This was a fermentation tracker that clips onto the keg. And then in 2018, they revised the Zymatic to release it as the Z series. And this time they made it so it could be stackable. You could block 4 units together. You could brew up to 38 liters, so 4 times what a single Zymatic could have done. And then there was a computer on the top that basically made them all work together, auto configured so that they all sort of, did their thing together. So 4 years since the original Zymatic, they've got 6 new products. They've had multiple fundraising campaigns, but Bill is still going. So in 2018, they announced the Pico U. Holler if you're losing me at all. This was their universal craft beverage brewing appliance. There were 2 versions, of course. A basic one, which basically just did coffee, tea, and something dubious called Fusion beverages, and a deluxe version, which also did beer, kombucha, and cold brew coffee. And the Kickstarter campaign for this raised over 800% of the funding goal. They then postponed the campaign and wrote this rather bizarre admission to all the people who funded them, admitting that they had a lot on their plate. But clearly not quite enough on their plate, because in 2019, they then announced the Pico Multi-Brew, which was going to brew coffee, tea, chai, kombucha, horchata. Not even sure that's legal. And in total then, since starting PicoBrew, they'd raised 15 to 20 million in crowdfunding, equity funding, and angel investors. And in fact, it was bizarre actually researching some of this stuff. Literally every time I did another search, another flipping product turned up. I don't know where they got their energy from for all this stuff. And in 2020, the last product they announced was something called Cast Forge, which was a little unit for accelerated aging spirits. You'd put your cheap whiskey in it, and a short time later, you'd end up coming out with barrel-aged, wonderful stuff. But what really set this product apart compared to all the others is Pico announced it whilst they were in receivership. And at this point, I think probably even the marketing department realized that something was wrong. And indeed, sadly, that was pretty much the end of the road for PicoBrew. They'd spent 2 years living off a bridging loan and had undertaken a last round of funding in 2019 to try and pay it back. As at December 19, they'd not agreed any funding. So in February 2020, the bridge lending group called Time Up and forced them into receivership. In April 2020, the winning bidder to buy the company and all of its assets was the PB funding group, who were the bridge lender who had pushed them into receivership in February. In October, the same group started auctioning off all of the operating assets, all the physical stuff, so packaging equipment, forklift trucks, bandsaws, production line, there's all sorts on the American auction site.
Apparently not the Pico pack production line. Apparently that's packed up in a lorry somewhere.
Okay, that's very interesting. Because they've sold off pretty much all the equipment around it. That's very odd. I mean, everything they've done, everything the group did with the physical assets, it looked like they had no intention of keeping PicoBrew going as an operating entity. The patents and all the IP are now up for sale or for licensing, and it looked like that was how they wanted to make the money. So that's interesting. There's hope yet, perhaps. So what happened? Well, one criticism is that the products were too complicated for novice home brewers, but too simple for experienced brewers. Some folks said that the products lacked affordability. So even though you paid $500 for the initial machine, ingredients still worked out to about $2 a beer. But most agree that the main cause for PicoBrew's demise was their product diversity, so that by 2019, they were no longer a company dedicated to beer. They were basically trying to make a huge range of products. Personally, I think if they were still focusing on product development whilst living on a bridging loan, rather than looking at sales and stabilizing cash flow, I think you probably have to look at management a bit. I wonder whether Mitchell was behaving a bit like he did at Microsoft, like he was a company with massive deep pockets that you could just keep on knocking new products out every week, which is how they survive, but not a small company. Anyway, and then in the end, the diversity became an issue for the rescue fundraising because the products serve different markets, and as a result, there were kind of a varying interest to different investors and not a single buyer. So let's return to 2020 and the Pico auctions and what we ended up buying. So most of us bought one of these. This is the Pico S, the Pro. It can produce 5 litres of wort for a roughly 1050 gravity beer. By the way, at this point, start jumping in if I miss stuff out. Less for a 6% beer, more for 4% beer. It's unclear at the moment, as far as I know, how much leeway there is to increase the volume that you brew. I know the salad drawer can accept more than that, but I have no idea how far you can push the manual brew. It's got a 1500 watt heater. It can steam heat to 96 degrees C and maintain it. And given that, for anyone who's interested in dialing in their medium rare steaks, you can also use the unit to cook sous vide. It's got a Wi-Fi connection to monitor the brew and load recipe programs. A nice little 2.7-inch display, which allows you to scroll around menu selection, brewing, cleaning, draining, and displays the stage of the cycle that you're at in terms of temperature and time. It's got RFID capability originally to recognize the Pico packs. You can't use your own ingredients for this machine, or you couldn't. And so now most of us have now started brewing with this unit. There's a couple of different ways you can brew. Most folk have been brewing using the manual option, as my glamorous assistant here is demonstrating. This wasn't actually an option until the firmware update they did in May 2019. Up until that point, you could only use the pre-packaged Pico packs. And this firmware update enabled you to use your own ingredients. In order to do this, PicoBrew sold a kit with reusable grain and hop bags for $40. And people have obviously bought similar or had it in their back cupboard anyway from Amazon and the like. Here's a picture of Mark Charwood's sack being lightly dunked. The mash and boil are based on a series of loops that you set the pico to do. So you tell it to heat to X temperature for X minutes. So you start by, for instance, you might start by telling it to get to 67 degrees. An alarm goes off. You pull out the drawer, stick in the grain, set it to maintain 67 degrees for 60 minutes. At the end of that, the alarm goes off. You pull the grains out. You tell it to reach boil, and so on. And you go through these loops. It's pretty simple. And here's Ken's kitchen brew going on. There are some idiosyncrasies to the unit. Efficiency and utilization are both low, but you can adjust for this. And also at the end of the boil, there is a DMS recirculation. It's largely a closed boil, and a low temperature one at that. So at the end, there's a recirculation process that you do with a keg attached to drive off any of the DMS precursors. Some folk, however, have been seduced by the promise of hands-free gratification and have looked at how to trick the Pico into accepting their own recipes and using the auto brew function. For this, you need a Pico pack or some kind of DIY container. This is to contain all the grain and the hops because the process is slightly different for automatic brewing. To date, there have been, well, up until very recently, there have been no DIY packs actually for sale, but Lab have managed to source some from abroad. This enables true single button brewing without the radio recognition of the pack. Brewers have also created these sort of local Pico servers with a computer or a Pi to load their own recipes onto Pico. I'm not even going to pretend I know how it's done. It's all black magic. Folks like Craig and Daz, I know, will be able to say more on this. And basically this enables these two things, the DIY pack and tricking the Pico into your recipes. This enables you to send it a fully programmed set of heating and recirculation cycles together with hop additions. So they're basically the same ones you'd have to input manually, but in series for a manual brew. But I hear you say, how does the magic machine deal with the grain sitting in the salad drawer during the boil? That can't be a good thing. Pico's brew solution to this is that the grain and the hops are not submerged during the mash and boil. So unlike the manual process, a keg is also connected to PicoBrew, and most of the liquid is actually stored in the keg during the mash and boil, leaving just a relatively small amount to be recirculated through the grain for the mash, and then through the hops for the boil. The hop additions are also pretty cleverly managed. There is a tiered sort of waterfall system that allows the hops to be submerged at different intervals whilst not getting all submerged at once. So you can see in this tier here, the first liquid addition goes into the far left hop container at 60 minutes, for instance, and that would carry on without any liquid getting into the others until 15 minutes before the end of the boil. And then the rotary valve in the Pico then squirts the liquid into the next container along. But that one, this time, overflows into the 60-minute addition to make sure you get your full 60. And then that happens up to 2 times more. And you can tell the Pico how many additions you want to do. So coming towards the end here, lastly, what are the pros and cons of the system? Especially selfishly, I guess, compared to my aims of a quick test machine? Well, the brew day is definitely much faster, both in terms of the length of the day and the amount of input required. There's virtually no, well, there is no babysitting required. There's no boilovers because of the closed boil. There's no worrying about temperature management, and cleaning especially is limited to about 2 minutes to rinse the salad drawer, which is the plastic tub that you can see on the front of it, and a 10 minutes automatic rinse cycle that the unit does. It was a very cheap purchase, which I think probably suckered a whole load of us there. You know, is a big piece of quite clever, shiny stuff. And it was only about £60 all in. Some paid more, some paid less. And I suspect they probably will remain quite cheap, given that for the time being they're obsolete. There was another unexpected benefit that I wasn't really, which I was pretty surprised by, is that I can now brew in the kitchen again. Natalie seems to consider it an acceptable kitchen appliance. And the mess and the smell and the heat are all much less than on a normal brew day. It brews decent beer. I've only done a few brews, mainly simple recipes. A lot of them smashes to test out hops and malts, like I say. There's good clarity, no off flavors that I could taste. The only thing I did notice is that most of the brews have been a bit rich, sort of very full-bodied, remind me of, you know, a high mash beer. So one of the things I wanted to do was stick a temperature probe in the mash drawer during the mash. It might be that my unit's off, or, but I've been very surprised by the quality of the beer. I wasn't really sure what to expect, especially when I tipped the murky stuff in the drawer into the fermenting keg at the end. So that's the good. So definitely a win there for everything I wanted out of it. In terms of the cons, all those clever liquid flow paths involve quite an intricate set of silicone hoses and valves. And these can become, especially the hoses, become stuck in storage and produce leaks. Thankfully, all of these seem to have relatively easy DIY solutions, most of them, around getting hoses or unstuck or pumps primed. But it's certainly not a foolproof Nespresso machine. You can't just scale recipes due to low efficiency and utilization. You definitely need to do a lot of tweaking and adjustment. And certainly I found that the PicoBrew recipe builder seems way off in its calculation of IBU compared to Beersmith or some of the others, and what I found in the beers that I've brewed so far. Be interesting to hear from others. And then lastly, I do still have a few concerns about this 96-degree boil, and the grain and the hops not being submerged, and this DMS recirculation. But I guess only time and brewing will tell if these are going to create issues or off flavors. Hopefully, hopefully PicoBrew's product development is better than their cash flow management. And that just about wraps up the introduction that I wanted to cover, to just try and stay on at a sensible level of detail without getting too much detail initially. Unfortunately, George can't join us right now, but if there's things that people wanted to talk about in greater deal, I am definitely happy to find the other brewers on here who've had much more experience with the unit than I've had. So yeah, thank you everyone, and yeah. Shall we do that? Stop share.
Cool. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. That was really insightful, actually, really good.
Well, I knew that I think all the best detail about how to use the machine and the building of the packs and stuff is probably best done in a bit more of a sharing Q&A style thing rather than a monologue. So I thought, when I started digging around them, I found out all sorts of things I never knew about the company. And for me, that was as interesting as the machine itself, actually, some of that stuff. So yeah, hopefully it was useful.
And just out of interest, was George Clooney, was he involved? I'm not going to mention, well, was he involved?
No, I don't think. I think they were too busy spending their money on product development than they were on anything like that. It would have probably been a much better idea had they focused on some of the marketing. Than
because I was thinking that's where all the money went. Yeah,
would have probably been a better investment than product number 59. That's for sure.
Ian, can you, what sort of efficiencies have you got? I've done 2 brews, and one I just threw everything in, and I think I got about 55, and another one I just put the water in cold. Second one, I preheated the water. Halfway through, I just kind of poked the bag about, and my efficiency went way down. Has anyone got any tips for getting a consistent efficiency or a higher one from the grain?
You can get a higher efficiency, up to about 67%, but you've got to do a few tweaks to the system to enable it. And I've been playing around with the Pico for the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, a couple of months. And the way I've found to increase the efficiency is to use the BM style of mash and mash upwards in the grain bucket itself, which involves a few tubes and everything else added within the grain basket. So whereas you will get a jet of water just coming down onto the grain normally, and it just flowing out the bottom, and you would end up with some of the grain still dry in the grain bed itself. The first reaction was use a wort aerator, so it would actually spray the grain with the wort. That didn't have much effect on efficiency. So what I've done, I'll show you a picture of it. It's that basically.
Okay.
So this is, strangely enough, this is out a Grainfather conical, but any old piece of tube would work. So what happens is the wort will go down through the actual tube itself and flood out through the bottom. There's very few drainage holes in the actual basket itself. And what will happen is the wort will completely immerse the grain and come over the top of the grain bag and overflow at the top. So throughout the mash, your grain is wet, and it's like a more traditional mash system.
Right.
And it still recirculates. At the end of the mash, it will drain out of the holes that you've got in the actual bin itself. So you will still get the draining of the grain and everything else. So you won't get a lesser volume out of it. It just takes longer to do. And that is the best way I've found, that's the best way I've found of increasing efficiency on the machine.
Clive, sorry, is that on the manual mode? Because it doesn't look like it. No, so that's on the actual Pico design, PicoBrew mode.
I must stress that I'm not interested in the Pico on the manual brew at all.
Right.
On the manual mode though, the keg isn't there. So those 2 keg disconnects you basically join together. So there's no kegs going through. So you actually flood the drawer.
Yeah.
The whole drawer is just submerged. So it's a
basically
that's why you have to basically put it out and put the hot additions in manually, because the whole thing's submerged. Whereas in the automatic system, that's why it's the GIF that Ian put up explains it, but until you kind of realise how both systems work, the penny probably doesn't drop. I mean, Clive has a dunk sparge. You could probably get into the 70s by a dunk sparge with the grain at the end as well.
Clive, could you, because you're using it in auto mode, could you show us a bit more about what containers you've got inside the salad drawer? I think that seems to be the holy grail that everyone is trying to work towards at the moment for enabling auto mode.
I've got an experiment. Oh, sorry. No, I've got an experiment I'm trying out at the moment. The best salad drawer thing or best basket you can buy is one from Wilko's, and they're advertised as a 5 litre Tupperware thing. And that I use with a grain bag, basically, and just drill a couple of holes in the bottom of it. I have recently got a 6 litre container, which will fit in there, but this does need the the top cutting off. So the best one at the moment, if you want to try a automatic brew and you're not buying one of those things from America, is get yourself down to Wilko's and buy yourself a 5 litre container. Tupperware container. I think they're about £5 or something, cheap as chips, and to use that. And the one I've got with the upward BM style, I've only drilled a couple of 6mm holes in the bottom of it for drainage.
Okay, so the holes are in the bottom for the drainage.
The holes are in the bottom. You can use it with a load of holes in the bottom and just let it sprinkle on top of the grain bed and it will work still. But your efficiency doing that method will be down to about 52%. So it's not ideal. So rather than me spending my time on brewing beers on the thing, what I've done is probably about 15 to 20 mashes on the thing, trying to get the mash efficiency up and then just chucking the work afterwards.
And what have you used for the hops, Clive?
Right. That is a purpose-made stainless steel hop container. So you can see how it overflows from section to section. There are a few other members on here tonight who have made their own hop containers and who have got different ideas of an easier version rather than getting something welded up. I must stress though, if you follow the Facebook forum for the PicoBrews, there's quite a few dimensions on there floating around of the heights you've got to have with the dividers in between the hop containers. And the ones that are floating around at the moment saying an 8mm gap or step is enough. Now, with my experiments, because I didn't believe them, if you try this out on an automatic brew mode, obviously just do a 2 or 3 minute mash. You don't want to do the mash, don't do any grain in it. All you want to do is test out your hop container and just put in hop container 1 or hop container 2 or hop container 3 or hop container 4. So you can automatically program everything else on the Pico. Bung up the holes you've got in the bottom of it. And just say you were going to do a hop container 2. So only liquid would flow into hop container 2 and then go into number 1 and flow out. What I found with the Americans, they were saying that 8mm gap was enough. And what I was finding, that hop container 2 should flow into 1, but it was also backflown into number 3 and backflown into number 4. Meaning that all your late addition hops are getting wet at the beginning of the mash, of the boil, basically. So that is not ideal because you don't want your hops getting wet before they should be getting wet. Mm-hmm. So I would say if anyone has bought one of the containers which was freely advertised on the Pico Facebook forum, is to just try out a backflow test with the hop container when you get it, because otherwise you may not be aware that your hops are getting wet before they should. And if anyone is making their own hop basket up, I found the optimal sort of step between the dividers is about 16 to 20 millimeters. So double that of what's been sort of spread about. But I would say it's important to try that test, whatever hop container you get, because you obviously don't want your last additions getting wet sooner than they should be. So that was made up a box section. It's 40 by 80 millimeter box, stainless steel box. I know Craig, if he wants to jump in, he's had a few ideas on doing more of a DIY version using stainless steel box and end plates that you can just...
Yeah, so my idea is I don't really want to get it welded, if I, because I want to make it as simple as possible. So we had a look at all sorts of containers, like can you get like ice pop things and stick them together and all sorts of stuff like that. But 40 by 60 stainless steel box, get it cut to between 125 to 130 mil, and then they'll all fit together. But rather than having them welded, I'm just thinking stainless steel clips, because all it's got to do is be held together gently, And you can either get stainless steel end caps to put in the bottom, or even bits of silicone that you can literally either jam in there or put it on. Because it doesn't matter if it flows slightly out the bottom, because the original ones have got slight holes anyway. So the idea is I want to be able to pull that thing apart and clean it. I don't really want big gaps. I mean, ultimately, I think you want something that is repeatable, because you want to get a profile, because you've got two things. You've got, you want to be able to understand what your grains are going to do, but you can adjust on that. But more importantly, you want to understand your hop extraction, and that to be repeatable, because otherwise what's the point in having a test machine? You know, and hopefully the fact that loads of people got these machines now means that if we can roughly standardize on something, then it shouldn't take that long to kind of figure things out. There's actually a friend of ours who works for a major brewery in England who was meant to be getting an IBU machine. Now, hopefully that's still happening, and we won't have to go with subjective measurement. We can actually, maybe run a few tests then. I don't know whether other people have access to that as well. Because I think that would, there is a profile in Brewfather, for example, but, I'm not sure the hop profiles are in the American group, especially as they kind of seem to have cheaped out on the end with the Pico packs. I'm not sure they're really kind of, one, looking to push the machine a little bit more, but two, maybe understand what IBUs you're getting, etc. on a brew. So
I could just say as well, I don't know whether Keith wants to show his polycarbonate version of the hop basket he made, but he's there at the moment. Keith, are you there?
Where is he?
Where's Keith gone?
I see him.
Was around before.
No, I don't think he's on it. No,
Yeah, I can't see it, Keith.
No. Keith has gone about the hop carrier in a different way. He's got some polycarbonate with some food grade adhesive and has actually stuck his hop container together in individual compartments and has drilled the holes in between the two for the overflow and everything else. And I know he's done a test today and it's come out the other side intact. So there is another way of making a hop container, and Pete that's on here as well, I don't know whether he's still on here, got his son to make him one out of stainless steel box section as well. There is one other way you can do it, which I haven't done, but if you've got a 3D printer, there is a template out there which you can make with that. Hang on. Stick that in there and fill it with silicone. And you can make one out of silicone. I haven't done it yet, I've printed them off, but the silicone is about 50 odd quid to buy, and I think you can make 3 out of it. But I'm quite happy with my stainless steel hop holder at the moment, so with funds being what they are, I haven't gone down that process yet, but there are templates out there to do it. So it's really for us as brewers to try and standardise on something. It's for us brewers to try and standardise on some sort of hop container or holder, and I'll be very interested from the people that have bought one of the American ones off Facebook site to see what they think of them, because the height is somewhat reduced and I can't help but think they're going to backflow when they're going to be used. That's my own thoughts on it. I haven't bought one and I wouldn't buy one, but if people have, I'll gladly take any feedback they've got on those and whether they were worth the purchase. The other thing I've made up is that for my manual brews. So that just sits on the bottom of the salad drawer. Just sit in there, and then the grain bag will just sit on that. So there's no way that the grain bag or material or anything else can go into the outlet. That was a very simple build. It's just a piece of stainless steel wire mesh, basically cut to size.
Yeah, because other people are buying it retail, they're getting the hop carrier you normally put there, I think, to stop it getting dragged in.
Yeah.
Other people use them, but
obviously on our machines that we've bought, there's no hop carrier with the machine. So you can just put a piece of stainless or anything in there, but just sort of a piece of stainless steel mesh was easy just to put for a manual brew. My other words of wisdom, if you want to make up any wands like that, you can do. All that is a keg post and a dip tube. So you can make up your own brewing wands. Very easy to make up. I've made up another wand, gas and liquid post as a thing. The things you can buy on AliExpress, those things, they don't work. So they're either gas or liquid. So if you want to make one up, I've just made one out of a gas post and a liquid post and put it together with a piece of tube. So very, very simple if you want to join the two hoses together. Other things before I bore you too much, you've got a 3D printer, make yourself one of those. I'll show you on the kit, I don't know if you can see up there, but normally with hoses, they get all over the place. You can't put the hoses anywhere. This just clips on the side and you can clip your hoses up there. Very, very simple just to keep them out of the way. So if you've got a 3D printer, just print yourself off one of those. Very, very neat idea. Not to bore you too much again, with my keg, there's my keg. I'll just show you the guts of it. Underneath there's cooling coil wrapped around the keg. I don't use the keg in the fridge to ferment. I haven't got a fermented fridge. I use a maxi chiller. On here as well, I've obviously got a probe in there on the actual lid to measure temperatures. And for draw off, either use one of those or use a cask widget. So you can draw off clear beer. But what I do is obviously there's a certain amount of crap that's still in the bottom of the keg. So I will use the liquid outpost to begin with, just to draw any crap I don't want off or on the beer, basically. So it will be drawn off. And that is about it, gentlemen. That's my experiences of the PicoBrew. If anyone else got any questions, please ask. But if not, I'm going to go back on mute and have a beer.
Thanks, Clive.
Clive, are you able to put your 3D printing templates anywhere that can be accessed?
This one is on Thingiverse or Thingverse or whatever it is. If you just type in PicoBrew on that, you'll get that one. So it's downloadable STL file. This one, I don't know whether I got it off Thingiverse or whether it was off the Pico Facebook site. I would have to look it up. I can't remember. Okay. If I was to make that again, I'll probably increase the actual silicon, because as you can see, it's fairly thin. So I'll probably increase the outer box dimensions. But that's unproven technology again. So yeah, I'll get round to it eventually.
Oh, thanks.
And what do you think, just back to Lee's question, what do you think on the manual brew would cause the efficiency to yo-yo up and down like that? I must admit, I've not had that, Lee. I've a few brews that I've done. True, yeah, fair enough, yeah. No, I think mine was in there from the beginning on every time.
Are you putting your water in cold or are you putting it like, yeah,
not preheating. Which is odd, really, given the fact that the end beer tasted like it had been mashed hot. You would have thought it would be completely the other way around and it would be thin.
Mm-hmm.
I've only done a couple of manual brews. I'm not interested in doing them, so I haven't really done too much efficiency experiments with that one, so I can't answer.
Yeah, mine I've done 3, and mine have been pretty much bang on what I'd expected every time. But I did see something on the Pico Facebook group the other day. Someone suggesting that maybe the steam injection that comes in sometimes during the boil was obviously diluting your wort, so that would potentially cause a drop in efficiency.
No, I don't think that happens actually.
It doesn't happen.
No.
I think it must happen, Pete, because I measured mine. I used 1.4 kilos of grain and put 5 litres in, and you should end up with about 800 mils absorbed in the grain. And after the mash, I took the grain out, measured how much liquid there was, and there was only, the machine looked like it had added about 500 mil, and then it added another 300 mil between there and the boil, and then another couple of 100 mil during the boil. I reckon it added about 800 mil, my calculations from the top.
Honestly, I've had that problem, I must be honest.
If you put 5 litres in at the start, you get 5 litres out at the end, and your grain's wet, the water's gone somewhere.
Yeah, I concur.
It takes the water from the reservoir. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and also the machine doesn't appear to release steam, does it? A great deal. You know, it's not like a boiling kettle or something.
Depends if you leave your lid off. Accidentally.
Yeah. But yeah, my the volume of water that I got out of it at the end was more than I put in the salad drawer on my last brew.
Yeah, I emptied the salad drawer 3 times, and I did calculate whether the volume and the gravity that I measured at each were concordant with each other. So every time there was more liquid, did the gravity go down the right amount? And it seemed to. So it seemed to tie in.
Just one thing, that is a Wilco's tub. I think that's another tub, but if you go down to Wilco's, you can buy that. But you can notice the difference between the size of those two. And I haven't tried this one yet, but that one will fit in there. So it tells you there's quite a bit of difference. In a Wilco's tub, you can fit about 1.5 kilograms of grain in the grain bag, and it will just sort of dome on the top, but it will overflow nicely. With this one, I've got no idea how much grain that would hold, probably about 2 kilograms, maybe less, maybe more, I don't know. But I would have to cut some holes in the side of it for drainage, and I don't know how that's going to perform, but Wilco's tub is the way to go at the moment, gents.
Yeah, I think what you said before about the mash, it's a bit like the first time people use a pressure cooker and they make stock or something and they get more liquid out. You know, it's that liquid's not really going anywhere. You know, you're adding stuff in, you're not taking it out. So it's a different thing, but I think one of the things that's frustrating on the Facebook group is there's quite a lot of novice brewers, but there's also quite a lot of people that are not interested in looking at the brewing process and what's happening and can it be improved. So, for example, the efficiency and stuff like that. You know?
I would also ask as well, could you brew a better beer on the Pico than a Grainfather BM or 3-vessel system? My honest answer to that is no. But then again, you're going to go into the arguments. You could go in the arguments, can you brew a better beer on the Grainfather rather than a 3-vessel system? So my honest answer for me, the PicoBrew, I bought it because I wanted an automatic brewing machine for test batches to upscale them later on with the bigger equipment. And I was running out of time to brew and spend 5 or 6 hours brewing on a Grainfather. So that's where the Pico fell into me, with it being an automatic test recipe brews, especially with smoked beers and specialty beers, just to see what comes out the other side. I'm under no illusions that it will brew a better beer though, so I don't think it will. It's just convenience and messing around and test batches for me at Pico.
What do people for pilot and test batches think about the fact that all the parameters of the system seem to be quite different from either 3 vessel or normal all-in-ones, you know, hop utilization and efficiency and things like that? That how easy is that going to mean piloting a recipe on here and then transferring it to another system?
Have you done it? Has anybody done it? Upscaled a test batch?
I haven't. No, I haven't done a test batch on the Pico and upscaled it. No, I haven't tried that one yet. But I've been messing around with grain and mash efficiencies and everything else to try and get those up to a more respectable level before I go down that route.
Okay, that was what you were asking there, Mez, I think, wasn't it? Sort of.
Yeah. What's the I also thought, oh, this would be great for doing small test batches and then scaling them up. And I thought, well, actually, is it? Because the system is quite different. It brews in a different, very different kind of way. The efficiencies are all completely different. The hop utilization is crazy different. How will you take it? Like, if you get a recipe working really well on this, you're going to have to completely change it, I would expect, in some way to brew it again. But I still think it's going to be a fun machine to experiment with. And for things like, I suppose, for trying a new yeast or a new grain or something like that, it's really easy. Or for doing maybe a couple of different brews where you just change one thing, like your yeast. Yeah, great for doing those sorts of things. But for scaling up, I don't know. I'm assuming there's going to be some challenges there to get the same recipe taste out, but we'll see.
Things like Brewfather can adjust, can't they? If you can change the equipment profile, don't they, or scale.
Maybe it's just that simple. Yeah, might be.
Yeah, how effective it is, I don't know. Interesting to find out.
I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind, because somebody might know this one. My first 2 brews came out exactly the original gravity as expected, using a 55% efficiency. 3rd brew, likewise. 4th one, which is a wheat beer, it was shockingly poor. Whereas when I was supposed to be getting an original gravity of about 1048, it came out 1031. And I just don't know why. Might it be something to do with not getting through the wheat, or has anybody else done wheat beers yet and had anything happen with them? Yeah, I did notice that the grain, when it came out, was a bit, a bit slimy, a bit stodgy. Well, not stodgy, a bit. It wasn't like with where it was, Maris Otter or something like that. There was a definite difference to it, and I just wondered if it was the wheat aspect which had caused it to perform particularly badly.
Never brewed a wheat beer on the Pico myself, Mark, but might it have something to do with the temperature it's going through the machine at? I don't know. That's me. That's my best.
Yeah. I did heat the water first. I heated it to 50 degrees first of all, because I was crushing the grain whilst doing that. So I thought I'd save a bit of time. So it didn't go through. The other ones I've just done from cold. But yeah, I don't know. I'll have to try again and see what happens, eh? So okay.
Presumably this is before, Mark, is it?
Pardon?
It's a batch of wheat you've used before, and it was the crush was your usual crush. Or?
Oh yes, definitely. It was a recipe that I have similar to what I've done beforehand, and used that the same wheat quite a lot of. So there were no surprises there, or nothing new, I would say, in that. So a little bit scratcher.
I mean, wheat's a bit more gelatinous, isn't it, than your normal sort of barley. So you know, if you packed it in a bag, there's a chance that the stuff that's on the outside has kind of acted like almost like a barrier to the grain that's on the inside, and maybe there's been a lot of dry grain that's not received any of the strike water.
I that's what I was thinking as well, Ken. And as I say, I did note it was a bit gloopy than normal when it came when I pulled the bag out. Ooh, yeah. So it could be that. Well, if anyone's going to try a wheat beer, then just be wary. What you do about it, though, I couldn't say. You have to take the bag out and then give it a good old kick in every now and again. I was talking about the brew there.
What's the gelatinization point, Mark? 60, 65 or something? I think if you've got your water above that, it might be that you've made a gel around everything by putting cold water on it, and then it's just sealed it in. Try using hot water.
It was 50 degrees when I dumped the grain in it, so I'd have lost probably 5 degrees in doing that. Probably more. No, probably more actually. I would say. Difficult to say, but it sounds reasonable, that, doesn't it?
Sometimes people mention rice hulls as a way to help wheat kind of when it gets stuck. I know it's like, you know, something to buy, it's a bit of a waste of money, but you often read that, to use rice hulls to kind of...
Certainly, I didn't put any in it, but it was only about 55% wheat. So I thought it was... So it was, the rest of it was barley. So it wasn't, oh goodness, if it was all wheat, I would... Yeah,
exactly, 100%.
I'd have put a load of some stuff in, yeah.
Well, right. Something that's probably worth trying if you want to change something. Like, it would be one thing to change in the process, I mean.
But you're quite so, yeah. Next time I try one, I will chuck a load of hulls in as well to take up another litre. Yeah. I get sucked up. You're allowed to squeeze rice hulls, aren't you? Or the oat husks. Do not squeeze the bag. Where'd that come from? I've got another query as well, if that's okay. I found myself using about a quarter of a packet of dried yeast. And I think, I'm not wasting all this. So I'm just putting a clip on it and sticking it in the freezer. Seems to reuse all right. But a lot of you are probably thinking, bloody hell, that sounds a bit dodgy. But I suppose experimenting with it to see if I get any faults as a result of it will show. But that's what I'm prepared to do at the moment, rather than cracking open a new packet of yeast each time. Any thoughts on that one?
I have a jar of dried yeast for a year and a half, and it's still viable, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, it wasn't so much the viability I was worried about, it was contamination. But, you know, you try and handle it as well as you can do, I suppose, but it's going to get exposed, isn't it? But from your experience, it was okay.
Do you keep it in the fridge or the freezer?
Freezer.
I've done that.
I put it in the freezer.
Okay, I put mine in the fridge, but I don't know which is better. Okay.
The worst that happens, you've lost 5 litres.
Exactly.
A couple of hours.
Mark, how do you measure that out?
Measure what? Sorry?
The yeast.
I have a look inside it and think, yeah, that's about a quarter.
That feels about a quarter.
Yeah, simple as that.
Okay.
I don't put it on anything first or get a spoon in there because I didn't want to contaminate it in any way. So I'm just going by, feeling the packet a bit. That sounded a bit rude. You know what I mean, though?
Calcs, isn't it? The online starter calculations, it's about the same thing as virtually. If you're working with slurry or you're working with a vial or whatever, you're probably not that far off from using the online starter calcs. They're not using microscopes or anything either. They're just getting you in the ballpark.
One other subject I wanted to just touch on as well to do with water treatment, but I don't want to go into it tonight myself personally. But if you're trying to upscale a recipe with water treatment, there's another little slight problem, is whereas the PicoBrew may use some of the distilled water from the top reservoir, and that will be distilled water or DO water or whatever you want to call it, and you're using the water profile in the main machine itself. So your end beer, the composition of it might be slightly different.
Yeah, that was exactly why I did all the measurements on the first batch, Clive. I put them in the group chat, and I just ignored the bit that I thought it was going to add, and just went for the mash piece. But
yeah. You may be able to get your mash pH where you want it in the range you wanted to get it on, but the actual final composition of the beer might be slightly different to if you're using a normal mash and sort of sparge.
Did you not just put the treated water in the hopper at the top as well?
You're not supposed to. The reason behind it runs up the steam generator, apparently, allegedly.
Yeah.
Who wants to test that one out then?
I'll do that.
I've treated the top with was it CMS, AMS, or whatever, and Camden, because our water, there's hardly anything in it here, but I wouldn't put salts in it. Is that
just descale it? It's the same as the coffee machine, isn't it?
it is. It's got a descaling function in the utilities, but probably better off not clogging it up in the first place, I reckon. It's put quite a small element, I guess, that it's flowing through, right?
Yeah, I don't know whether Craig's got any, Craig G, that is, any more information on scalers getting used and steam generated.
I suppose the heating process is a bit like a kettle, really. Not a kettle, it's a bit like a an iron, isn't it? Small jet of steam. And irons do clog up and scale pretty quickly, I suppose, don't they?
Yeah.
Also, coffee machines
on
a normal scaler in as well, because it will kill a lot of coffee machines. So I would avoid it. I mean, if someone's got 2 or 3 machines, right? But I would think that's the weak point. The weak points I've seen from people who've had them for a while, and that's the other side of the pond. Don't put hard water in there. But I haven't really seen that much evidence of it. And the other one is gunk bugging up. So they say run deep clean every 3 times, but I would clean out each time, because the machines that I've seen where they've had the bits that die in, and the problem is you've got about 70% of the parts are off the shelf, and then there's some custom parts that people haven't figured out how to swap out yet. So there are parts floating around, but there might be $2 parts, but you'd be paying $20 to bring them from the States. That seems to be like work gunking up bits and pieces. And that's either people not cleaning the machines out or letting them sit there or whatever, I don't know. But that's probably what's going to kill your machine more than anything else from what I've seen.
It's every 3 brews, yeah, it recommends.
That's what it recommends. But the other thing as well is it's quite picky about what you use as a cleaner. So it says don't use PBW, don't use sodium bicarbonate, use dishwasher tablets, but only certain types. So I think the Aldi ones and leader ones are fine. So, but some of the other ones have got whatever in. So my guess is the tolerances of some of the machine, the parts that they've made, they're not very chemically resistant. Like, this isn't my area of expertise, but which is kind of what I've seen around.
Yeah, when I did my 4th brew, I had everything ready and started it off, and it says time to do a deep clean. I thought, now you tell me, you bastard. You could have told me after I've done the 3rd one. Now I know then.
Was it talking about itself?
Yes. No.
Craig, where's that info on which tablets to use? I've
I think it's on the Facebook group. On the Facebook group there is a whole load of
reference here. Yeah.
on their files, because the instructions from PicoBrew themselves are just you don't want to be following them. I mean, but on there I'm pretty sure they've got it about what to avoid and that. There's some really useful. I mean, I kind of sound quite denigrating about the group, but there's some really useful info. There's some good brews on there, but there's also I think it's not a great format, Facebook, for finding anything. And they don't seem really interested in kind of change. They seem interested in replacing what they have now. But definitely worth a look round. And they're trying to put together some kind of source of their information. But there's quite a lot in the file section.
Okay.
You just have to dig through it.
I won't use percarbonate again then.
I only used it because Lee told me to.
Well, the problem is Americans have got such different water as well. You know, them using percarbonate is very different. If you've got soft British water, but it depends where you are. You know, if you're in London or East Anglia or something, well, it might be the same effect. I don't know.
I think the Pico Facebook problem might also suffer from what most forums might suffer from, where people are new to brewing. They bought a brewing machine, they brewed a beer, they're all enthusiastic and everything else, but they haven't got the knowledge behind them of, say, 3-vessel systems or manual brewing on other systems to curb that enthusiasm. If that makes sense. So I might be going gung-ho and so, oh yeah, I've brewed this beer and look at this beer and isn't that wonderful and everything else, but not having the experience of brewing knowledge behind them and knowing that you could and should be able to brew a better beer on a different system.
And to very quickly, Clive and Lee, I think, and other people that I've got it. So I picked up a Pico from Clive on Saturday. It's still in the car, but I will get it out very shortly. I thought this was going to facilitate my life to some extent. I'm brewing on a 3-vessel system, and a brew day takes all day, basically. Is it going to facilitate my life? Am I going to? I know, but I really wanted it to. Right, I'm going to try this yeast. I'm going to try this water. I'm going to try different types of sugar, maybe in the boil. But I just think, how many man hours is it going to take me to get up to produce something that's scalable, that's going to enable me to brew something on a bigger vessel. And it does it from what I've been hearing up until now, and tell me if I'm wrong, but is it fit for purpose?
My response to that would be, Dennis, is that just say if you wanted to try out a different yeast or a different hop or a slightly different grain bill, you could use the Pico to brew a batch of beer, 5-litre beer, brew the same beer but change the yeast on the next 5-litre batch of beer. So you get the difference between the two yeasts from that point of view. Again, with the hops, if you wanted to use hops in brew number 1, change hops completely for brew number 2, you could get a direct comparison between the two. With scalability, that's going to take a bit of work, I'm afraid. I think it will be able to do. You will be able to do it, but it may take a bit of work to get an exact brew out of a larger system. But from messing around with test batches, certainly with hops, I mean, if you want to try a different profile hop in a 5-litre test batch from 2 or 3 test batches, ideal. And same with yeast, if you want to see what a different yeast will do, because they've got a comparable product from the last 5-litre brew you've done.
What's everyone fermenting in? You've got them. 5 years kegs.
I'm using a 9-litre Corny.
I use a 9-litre Corny as well.
And then when it comes to for putting it in for dispense, I got one of these.
That get a brewed 6.5 litre.
That's the one, yeah.
I've been using a plastic 10-litre fermenter.
Oh, there you go, bragging again.
Are you filling it before you put it in, Lee? Are you putting it straight in? Is it a heat tolerant one or?
Do you know, I've not. I bought. Well, I mentioned it to a couple of people at work who bought them, and I said, You don't really want to be buying a keg and spending 60, 70 quid just to do it. So I've been doing the recirculation part with the mini kegs that you get full of ghost ship and things, and just putting the probes in the top, the ones in the top of that. So the whole brew's done through that, and then I just drain from there back into the salad drawer, and then salad drawer into the plastic thing. So
why don't you just pour it out of the keg into the?
I could do, but the keg's hot, and you've got the little tap bit. It's just I've got the probes in there. It's the machine will pump it over and do it. It's pretty easy.
I don't know whether anyone's tried a counterflow chiller as well, because that would be possible to do, because it's always recirculating. So in theory, you could put either a plate, which I don't use, but a counterflow chiller on there and cool the work down that way. It's straight into a plastic fermenter.
Yep.
Because corny kegs at 9.5 litres or 6.5 litre are bloody expensive.
Yeah.
And they're more than the machine itself. So yeah, if you can get away with a plastic fermenter and your fridge set up or whatever, it's probably the easiest way to do it. And you can then do multiple batches as well in quick succession. So.
The only issue I've had is during the recycling step, it will foam a little bit out the top of the thing that I'm using instead.
I've seen a few people on Facebook group as well say certain things they've chosen, the hardware for the grain basket and stuff, use firm cap, because there seems to be certain recipes that foam as well, so it's probably worth adding just a drop of firm cap or equivalent.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. I'll do that next time.
On my second beer, I forgot about that bit about not cooling during that recirculation at the end. And I put my keg in and I thought, oh, I'll get cooling now while it's doing that. Now I know why they say don't do it. Because it foamed up and it almost came out the top. What that might have done as well to not do the process properly because of the temperature it was then at is another question. Yeah, but you learn by these things, don't you? Well, some people do.
Well, so you're talking about the DMS step. Where's the DMS going? Is it as it goes in and out the keg? Because I've got two long, what are they called? Not probes, but wands that are both in the bottom, or is it because it's aerating in the salad drawers? Anyone know?
All right. It asks you to hook up to the gas in, doesn't it, for where it's pumping into it, so it's dropping it from a height.
And that's what I'm not doing. So that's why I'm asking whether it's doing it in the salad drawer or that part.
Clive,
I would say it's in the keg itself, because it is going in the gas post and it is actually dropping through and splashing out. So that's the only place I can see it's doing, because the salad drawer is a concealed, enclosed container, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I thought. So I'm going to make a shorter wand so it replicates that then. Yeah.
Can I just ask what the science is behind that? Does anybody know in terms of dropping it? Because my interpretation of DMS is that it always has to be boiled off, or the way you get rid of DMS is you boil it off. But in this case, I'm just struggling to understand what the science is behind dropping work from height drives off DMS in an enclosed container.
It's not enclosed.
Is it that it's volatile and it needs to be vaporized in some way to be carried away? So one way of doing that is by heating and generating steam. Another way is through, I don't know what the correct term, but would like an aerated kind of jet in that.
You don't have the normal keg lid on either. I'm wondering whether people think you've got a closed keg system. You don't.
Yeah, but on the Pico keg, it's only quite a small hole during that recirculation. So on a standard Pico keg, yeah.
Oh.
It's the biggest.
I don't have the lid on mine when I do that. Am I doing something wrong there? In that recirculation at the end, when I'm using a little keg, I don't have the lid on.
I think that's right. Yeah, the lid should be off.
All right.
The lid is off. Throughout the throughout the process, the lid is off. It only goes on when I want to cool the keg down. But obviously, you've got to make sure you don't cool the keg down and collapse the keg, because there's a decrease. But that probably won't happen anyway. But
you probably don't use in tinfoil or something until it's cooled a bit.
Everything I know on DMS with the rules of boil and everything else, when you think about the Pico, you think, well, that is slightly different because the temperature's it's not a boil as such either, but there is a steam generator in there, so it does get hot and it does steam when it's in the keg when you're recirculating it throughout the process.
It's quite specific though, isn't it? That recirculation step is for driving off DMS, and
what it's
like the steam and the temperature is all within the salad drawer. Obviously, you're going to lose a little bit of temperature as it's being recirculated, so it's actually getting a little bit cooler. It just seems a bit backwards from what we all know about driving off DMS.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Doesn't.
Thing is though, that has anybody had any problem with DMS in their end product?
Possibly, but I couldn't place. I didn't know if it's DMS or not. I'm probably not good. I don't know if I've tasted DMS or not. I can't put my finger on it.
Okay.
But is it DMS? I thought DMS was only formed at boiling temperatures. So if you never boil, then the precursors, the amount that convert to DMS, I guess, would be very small anyway.
It's a good oxygenation step anyway, that.
Yeah.
And has anyone tasted any other off flavors with their brews?
I've been really pleased with the end product so far. I know I had a problem in the last one, the wheat beer, but I went and bolstered it with a bit of DME at the end of it. But so far, I've been absolutely delighted. Yeah, or is that because all the other beers are just crap?
We know your beers aren't crap, Mark.
No, I'm really, really pleased. I did not much of an experiment. I thought I'd go at a dark mild for my third one, and I'm really, really chuffed how it's come out. Lately. I'll be back.
As mentioned though, Mark, with that dark mild, if you were impressed with that, all you need to do is tweak the recipe a little bit on the Pico, and you've got another 5 litre batch you compare the two for recipe creation in the future.
Mm-hmm.
The scalability might be a little bit different, but at least you can try it on a 5 litre quick batch, because brewing on one of those only takes 2 or 3 hours, doesn't it, from start to finish?
Yeah.
You press a button and off it goes. So from that recipe creation, it's a wonderful thing. So I don't want to sound a downer on the PicoBrew. It might have come across that I've been down on the PicoBrew. It's not. It's just as long as you know what the machine is capable of and how it works.
What's really surprised me is how awful the wort looks when it comes out, or however you say it. It just looks like gravy or something, and dishwasher, and you put it in the fermenter and think that's not going to go very good. And I only used low Cutler Marisota, and within a day in the keg, it was completely clear afterwards. So all of that filtering that you do in your 3-step that doesn't seem needed, to be honest.
Use any finings like Protofloc or anything?
There was Protofloc in the boil, yeah. But I mean, like I say, that what you pour into the fermenter looks like dishwasher Yeah, horrible stuff.
And of course, they tell you not to squeeze the bag, yeah. And of course, the first time I done it, that was the first thing I done. I said, I'm going to get all the water out of here. So when I squeezed, I went, oh my God. It was like the water at the Thames. I thought, what have I done?
Yeah.
But like Lee said, give us
Like playing the bagpipes.
I started clearing quite quickly, actually. But yeah,
I suppose the other thing to do is you could take a brew that you were already brewing to scale and knew very well, and brew that on the Pico, and see if the reverse is true, whether you can scale down on it. Yeah, how different it tastes, how close it is to a brew you know well.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
That's precisely what I did with the Dark Mild.
Mm-hmm.
And I was more than impressed with how it turned out. Strangely enough, though, no, I won't go into it. I ended up with something that's 2.3%. When it was weaker than it was meant to be, but it hit the things that it said it was going to. It's because my scaled up recipe doesn't hit the anticipated levels according to Beersmith. So I have to play around with it, but it didn't fanny around on the Pico, and it came out exactly as intended, strangely enough. So
yeah. What profile were you using for that, Mark?
Sorry?
What profile did you use? Were you using Beersmith?
Oh right, I used Beersmith, but Ian puts his profile on it. You had a go, didn't you, at one, Ian? And it's largely based on 55% efficiency. I suppose that's the most important aspect of it. I can't remember what the other parameters are on it. Maybe you can, Ian. But I just you made it up.
There was one on the PicoBrew Facebook site, which I got hold of, that was milling around, which I've used on Beersmith. How accurate that is, I don't know. I haven't done the tests on it yet, so, and I'm still playing around with mash efficiency. So, yeah, until I've got that sorted out, I don't really want to brew too much more until I've got my system pegged down with mash efficiency and seeing how hoppy things can get and getting everything up and running. So, but it'd be interesting. It's a very good point, Ian, I think, of downscaling a recipe, because that would give you a very good idea of how it performs or what the beer comes out the other side. To know a beer that you've brewed time in, time out on a large vessel and scaling it down. Very good point. I'll take that one.
And I must admit, in terms of what I wanted from the machine, I never expected to be that exacting that I'd be able to scale up, complex recipes. I simply wanted to, try find out what a hop tastes like, a particular hop, and then introduce that into a scaled up brew once I was happy, if I liked the hop flavor or the malt flavor on, So yeah, my requirements were very low, low expectancy, and like other folk have said, it's more than surpassed that. So for 60 quid and a 2 or 3 hours brew, that's happy days.
I think a 5 litre batch of beer is the perfect starter size for a 25, 30 litre batch of beer, right? So instead of just growing a starter and throwing it all away, you get to drink it and then just pitch the yeast into your next brew. That's what I'm intending to use it for a fair bit, and just making starter water.
I suppose the only thing there, though, is given like you say, the look of that, given the look of the wort that goes into the mini fermenter, yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to pitch all of that into the next brew.
Yeah, I was trying to find a little 5 litre conical today, but there doesn't seem to be one that exists.
Maybe nearest one you can get is one of those little brew bucket things they do. As a 5 litre conical, Rob sells them, little brew buckets, so the mini brew buckets.
Right, I'll have to have a look at that, and then you can just drain off that bit, Trub. Day or two in, Ian.
About 120 quid to buy, though. That's the yeah, not cheap, not cheaply.
Yeah. But then you need a miniature fridge as well, one of those little bar top ones as well. Otherwise, it would look silly in a big fridge.
But yeah, I've enjoyed it so far, and it's a great little bit of kit. So easy to use once you've got over those teething issues. It's brilliant.
Nobody's mentioned they're noisy little buggers as well, aren't they?
Oh, they're noisy, all right.
Yeah.
I thought there was something wrong with mine when I first turned it on. I mean, my God. In fact, I think I contacted Clive. I says, I think there's something wrong here. No, he says they're noisy.
I was laughing when Ian said it had the wife acceptance factor in the kitchen. I was like, did you hear it when it was on?
No, she was less enamoured once it was going. But even so, I mean, compared to a normal brew, blimey. Yeah, no, I'm very happy with that as well. She even suggested doing one before Christmas as a family.
I have seen people saying you can switch out the fan though, and that's a big part of the noise, but I don't know.
What?
I've seen people switch out the fans, but I've no idea whether it really makes a huge difference because they are noisy
Right.
machine.
Yeah, that fan's there for a reason though, isn't it?
True. But I believe they just switch them out with high-end computer fans, which are not expensive.
Oh, when you say, oh, sorry, you replace.
Oh yeah, not taking them out, swapping them.
Yeah, I misunderstood you. Sorry.
So, Charles, are you tempted? Has this swayed you, or has it put the nail in the coffin?
Oh, you're muted.
Okay. Well, to be honest with you, I can see, as mentioned earlier, there's pros and cons, right? The fact that it's a very short brewing time is a good pro. But there again, I do enjoy being out of the way for an entire day brewing. You know, I get out of the house, I set up my beer gazebo in the garden and I brew in that, and I don't care how long it takes me because I get so much fun out of doing it. So to me, the short brewing process might be a bit of a con, and something I wouldn't like. If I was going to get one, it would be, I think, as Lee said, it would be to trial yeast starters. I did think maybe it would be a good idea to get one to try batches, but the brewing process seems so different in terms of upscaling it. I'm not so sure that would be a good idea. So I'm still undecided, basically, still undecided. But
would you look at it in comparison to anything like a Grainfather or a Braumeister?
Now, that's a difficult question to answer. If you look at what the original price of the Picos were, and you got all the bits and pieces, and you didn't have to struggle going around Wix's or the local co-op store or some charity shop to buy a plastic bowl. Originally, when everything came together, the price was really quite high, wasn't it? And for what you'd have paid for a Pico, you could have got a damn good brewing unit like a Grainfather or perhaps not quite a BM, but it was about half the price of a BM, I think, wasn't they, when they came out? In some ways, to try and compare pricing is a bit of a blind alley. You pay for what you want. And in that respect, you don't mind how much it costs. But no, I'm still on the fence. I enjoy watching people experiment. The world of brewing is fascinating to me. And I love seeing people try new things, trying out new ideas, making new equipment. And if I'm honest, I like to see people making mistakes as well, because it's always quite amusing. So I will sit by the side for the time being, and maybe I will, maybe I won't. Still totally undecided, I'm afraid.
I just see someone chats about the make a 20-litre batch and try different yeast. Yeah, that's a good comment. Easy enough to do. But to try different grains or try different hops, you can't really do that.
Yeah.
Where can you buy them from?
I didn't get that. What was
Sorry, where you purchase them from?
That sounds like a Pico in operation.
You want us to type your question in the chat instead?
Yeah, I think there's a problem with your headset, unfortunately.
I think the question's where'd you get them? So the guy who was selling them on in the US has sold out. But that PicoBrew site, there was a guy today off the Facebook one. There was a guy today offering one in the UK for someone to buy. So I don't know if others will come up.
It might be worth pinging the. I don't know who was last with the guy in the States, but I pinged him a few weeks back. He didn't have anything for sale, and I asked him for Sarah Pantry, and it turned out he'd had 2 units that had come straight back that the sale hadn't gone through, and he had another couple where the lid of the salad drawer was missing, and he didn't talk about a price for those, but I got the feeling that, to be honest, he'd sooner give them away. I don't think he wanted to hear the word Pico ever again. So he might have some returns or stuff coming back.
Okay.
Mention that to me, Ian.
I'll check that out.
I had my problems when I first got mine 3-4 weeks ago, and he suggested I contact him because he might have a spare he'd send out, but instead he just gave me a refund. So actually mine is for free because it works now.
Yeah. It's a shame. It's a shame. All the I can't believe how many of the units seem to have that hose kinking issue. Just pretty much seems to be almost everyone had those initial leaks.
My one hasn't suffered with that. I'm probably the only one on here who hasn't.
No, mine either.
That's good. Mention the leak Taylor play as yet.
I might be letting one of my spare machines go, but I've got someone else in the pipeline at the moment because I bought too many of them. I went a bit OTT, but I might have one up for sale, brand new in box. But I'm just waiting for someone else to get back in contact with me regarding that. But I must confess as well, I like taking things apart. So my original thought was taking the bits out of a Pico machine and making a larger brewing capacity machine. I still might do it, but that is another thought I've got of increasing because we're all talking about 5 litres, but with bigger grain baskets and everything else, and maybe using 19-litre corny kegs, you may be able to push the boundaries on 5 litres quite a bit. But that's all experimentation in the future.
When I was looking at their other products, I ended up looking at the Zymatic a bit more. I'd not really paid it any attention, and that you can do 10 litres, 10 litres. I think the Zymatic will do. It's got the same heater. It's got more temperature sensors, but I don't know what the other differences are. But actually, I thought that looked quite an interesting bit of kit.
It is, but they cost money. Whereas if you buy a Pico for 60 quid all in, it's ridiculously cheap.
So Clive, do you think there's ways in the future of expanding the capacity? Up to about 10 litres?
I would have said so, yeah. But it just needs more experimentation and seeing what we can do with the amount of grain. Because I've already mentioned the Wico's basket would hold about 1.5 kilograms of grain. I think the bigger basket will hold more, but with more grain in there and limited space, what would that do to your efficiency? Would it start going from my 66 or 67% back down to more 50, 52%? It'd be interesting to try a few experiments out. Or there's another thought, I think Craig's mentioned it on a different forum, of hooking 2 Picos up together. and doing a batch with 2 Pico brews, brewing in tandem, basically. But that obviously won't work if you've only got one machine, but it might be possible to increase the brewing length of the machine. How much, I don't know. I haven't done experiments, but I will at some point.
I mean, could you put split some of your grains? So some of it's in the salad drawer and then some of it is in the keg in a bag. I mean, also you've got to hike it out at some point. But...
Again, if you put the grain in the keg and put hot water in the keg as well, and did a more of a traditional mash or boil in the bag in the keg, but use the Pico as well to continuously circulate, it might well work, Ken. I don't know. It's a good idea. It could work. You would obviously have to get you wouldn't really want to do that in the keg though, would you? Because getting the grain out that top of the corny keg lid would be problematic.
Yeah, I mean,
or something.
I've sort of gone around that by actually using a stock pot instead of the keg. Yep. Certainly works in terms of, you know, the wide area at the top. Yeah.
My initial thoughts to that, yes, it would work then, because there's no real. You just use it as a brew in a bag system.
Yeah, yeah.
But you've got 2 bags rather than just the one in the Pico.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting idea, Ken. Very interesting.
Have somebody thought of taking off the hops from the salad thingy and put it outside of the machine just to fix the hop utilization issue?
I've seen some people doing hop teas instead, or boiling the hops separately.
For the bittering, I suppose you can use the CO2 extract, whatever it's called. So you don't get any soaking up of the hops. Is that what you're talking about, Philip? You were.
I just received my machine just a couple hours ago. I just take it apart just to see how it goes inside. So I'm just curious. You have the pipes that goes for the 60-minute hops and then the later hops edition. So I'm wondering if you can take this compartment outside to maybe easy operating apparatus and make it easier for utilization, or I don't know. I'm just imagining stuff because I just got mine a couple hours ago, as I said.
I think the issue there is there's this clever little rotary valve and it squirts the liquid into different places. So it's not a single place that it's coming out of that you could then take it outside the machine. But on the manual brew option, you're in charge of sticking them in whenever you want. So in whatever bags you want, in whatever fashion you want. So to be honest, it's not an issue when you manual brew. It's only if you want to try and do the one button brewing that it starts to become, I guess, a bit of a head scratcher about how you manage it.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah, with the rotary valve, and if you do an automatic brew, you can set it up to only have one hop addition, obviously. So you don't have to use all 4 hop additions. You can only just use one. So from that point of view, you know where the liquid is coming out of hop tube 1. But I think that's more of a manual option, basically, rather than just the push one button brew, which I'm after. The same, I've just thought, going back to what Ken had mentioned about putting the bag into a boiler or something, or into a stainless steel vessel. with a one push button, you obviously have to go out at some point and remove the grain. Otherwise, you're going to start pouring 90-70 degree wort over that grain, which obviously you don't want to do. So it is
Decoction.
It's still a one push button brew, but if you want to extend the brew length, as Ken said, you'd have to remember to take the grain out of the vessel at some point.
Yeah, Ken.
It's an interesting idea, but no, it's just not a true push one button, is it?
Just wear some gloves.
Not
woolly ones.
And on that point, Daz, when the automation device arrives on the big pallet from the United States, what's going to happen then? Is it going to be a one touch button process, and everything's going to be great?
That's the theory. Clive probably has better ideas about how the one-touch stuff works. Basically, we bought a case of the ones from the US, off the Pico Brewers group on Facebook. So yeah, I mean, you've got to set up a Pi to be able to do it. But yeah, it looks like it's, once that's there, you can do your own recipes, and yeah, it's one touch, but yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, though, I would just test out the hop carrier, and does it flow in the right direction? That's the only thing I would test when you get it. I don't know the answer. My gut feel is it will backflow, but that's only my gut feel. So I would test that out when you get them.
If Clive, if the material they're made of is, if it's possible to cut it, knowing what you do know about the dimensions, do you think it will be possible to shave it down and create enough drop for backflow, or is it too low, like I think you said before?
Probably good. It looks
a bit to it.
Material.
The original ones that John Gregory came up with were the full height, so they would have been about 125, 127 millimeters tall. And those you could have probably cut down or changed the hole positions. But on the batch he's now selling, due to his manufacturing problems or getting them from Japan or wherever he was going to get them from, he's significantly reduced the height of the hop carrier itself. So if you go back and have a look at the one he was going to sell everyone, it was 125 millimeters, and now it's about half of that. So with my experiments, I've used a 16 mil gap or drop between each of them. So you might find yourself of running out of room in the last hop carrier if you start reducing the height of the overflows. I don't know. I'll leave that to you, gents, to find out when you get them and to experiment with.
Sorry. Go.
The other way around it might be is to use a system, but only use it with sort of 2 or 3 hop compartments. So you get the end hop compartment, you leave at the height, forget about the next one, and just make the next one lower.
Yeah.
So you don't use the 3rd hop addition, or you don't use the 2nd hop addition. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So play around with it when you get them in. I hope it does work for you. I really do, but I can't help but feel he's compromised the height. I would have much rather seen the hop carrier you could buy at the full height and just source your own grain basket.
That's Barry's original, Clive.
Yeah, or the original one he was going to sell people. But I don't want to rubbish it or anything like that, because I haven't used his particular product. I'm seeing one in the flesh. They say it works all right, but my my feelings on the subject is even the original Pico packs themselves, with the height difference only being 8mm, they might have suffered from backflow in those. And the thing is, if anyone does a test and they don't bung up the drainage holes in the bottom of them, you would never know. It's not until you've bunged up the drainage holes in the bottom of them and done a independent test with hop 1, hop 2, hop 3, hop 4, that you take the hop carrier out and you think, well, that one shouldn't be wetting there, and it is. So it's just something to be wary of when you get the piece of the kit, and just try it out.
But it's only an issue, are you saying, with these drainage holes, is it only an issue? Is the backflow only an issue if the drainage holes are blocked up? If they're open, are you all right? Or?
No, because if you did the test with the drainage holes open, you would pull the hop drawer out and it would be empty in all of them because it's already drained.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas in practice, when the machine's plonking a load of water in, it should be overflowing from right to left or left to right. It's going the other way as well. But you would never find out because the thing's buried at the back of the machine.
You can't see. Yeah, you can't see it working.
No. So it's just something to be wary of. Whether it has a problem or not, I don't know. Can't answer that.
Although, in all fairness, Clive, the ones that John Gregory's offering up, they're a wee bit more, well, I'm not going to say opaque by any manner of means, but you might just be able to faintly see through them because they are that wee bit. Whereas once you've got a steel thing like that, you can't see through it.
And the interesting thing is that obviously Keith is not on here though, but his one he made of polycarbonate. I think you can actually see what's happening.
Oh, yeah, you could see through Keith, yeah.
So,
providing you can see through the salad drawer and the the grain bag and all the rest of it.
It's interesting experiments anyway to see how you get on.
By the way, are you putting the hops straight inside this basket, or are you using some kind of a bags?
Use a hot bag.
Hot bags or tea bags, some of the tea bags. Yeah.
And another thing tonight, it was only about an hour before I came on here. I'll mention it, but I haven't tried it. It's just an idea. Is where I've been using an upward mash, sort of BM style mash coming up and over. Could you put a lid on the hop container itself, put some tubes down into the hop container, so when it squirts the water in, it doesn't squirt it on the top and start splashing around, which could backfill and bits and pieces. It actually goes down through the pipe and the thing fills up from the bottom upwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's another idea, yeah.
I've only just thought the idea about an hour before I came on here, so just an idea at the moment, but I'll just put it out there just in case anyone else wants to take that one forward or think, oh, I might but try that. It might work. There's nothing to say as well that the backflow issue isn't caused by splashing rather than actually backflowing. Because it could.
So, Clive, nobody would have had a definitive answer as to whether a Pico pack backflowed or no, because you couldn't see inside them.
No.
And when you took them apart, with the holes in the bottom, the liquid had already drained out anyway, so you wouldn't have been able to tell with the original packs. So it's a total unknown.
No. It's I'd be interested in what people come up with ideas and stuff on hop carriers and stuff. But I know myself, Keith, Pete, and Craig have spent quite a bit of money and quite a bit of time and effort trying to get the ultimate hop carrier.
I see Keith's just joined us, so there might be a bit more show and tell.
Oh, Keith has joined us again.
Oh, I've just had to rewire my internet. My daughter's wiped out my mesh system.
Keith, everyone's looking forward to seeing your polycarbonate hop container.
As long as they promise not to ask me if it's food safe. That's what I've made.
Very tidy.
Good work.
I've only used it once. I brewed for the first time today with a Pico, with an automatic brew. So I haven't fermented it yet, so I can't tell you what it tastes like.
What have your other brews been like, Keith?
That's the first time I've brewed with a Pico.
Oh, okay.
I had no interest in doing a manual brew, but I just waited and I had everything lined up to do an automatic brew. So,
Keith, so you got a sheet of clear polycarbonate. You measured up some dimensions and stuck it together. Yeah?
I ordered pre-cut polycarbonate.
Ah.
I think the actual cost of the polycarbonate was £8, another £10 for postage, and the tube of glue was £15. But you can get three of those out of one tube of glue.
What sort of glue are you using?
It's a clear structural adhesive made by Permabond. It's TA4204. I'll just check my emails.
Not Airfix, Keith.
No, it's a
Bostic.
A sort of Diano type super glue, is it?
No, it's a 2-part glue.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got an empty one. I'll just go and grab the tube.
I believe Keith did do quite a bit of homework on this beforehand to make sure it was food safe. Okay, just to make sure it was.
I think he's not fully sure about that. I know the guy who put him onto it though is a water chemist, so yeah. But once you put 100 degrees in there or close to it, it changes things, doesn't it? So.
Yeah, I'd be more concerned about how the adhesive holds up. That's all really.
Yeah. So it held up once. I don't know how it'll hold up long term. Can you read that?
Not at all.
Permabond T84204, 2-part structural adhesive. So you can't find anything for glue and plastic that says it's food safe. So take your life in your hands, I'm afraid.
I'm going to type that here. What was it again? Permabond?
TA4204.
4204. Thanks for that.
And I made up a little jig for holding everything square when I glued it together.
Cheers, Charles. Good to see you.
Right. Thanks for a nice evening.
Good night, Charles. That's why I think there's some mileage in Craig's idea of just buying some box section, stainless steel box section, hold them together with stainless steel clips on the top, silicone sheet in the bottom, job done. No glues, no adhesive, easy to take apart, easy to clean. But again, it's unproven technology because Craig's got to put his finger out and make one.
To be honest, I just ordered some last week and they cancelled it, but they were complaining about the price of cuts. But I will this week. But I'll put up the stainless steel end caps as well, which would obviously add to the cost, but it's another option where you just literally plug them in. So I was looking for silicone ones everywhere, which I found as well. But,
I would have thought without any kind of gaskets, it's going to leak everywhere.
it doesn't matter about leaking because in the actual hop carrier there are small holes anyway, so you're just stopping it flooding out, which is why potentially you could just have them sitting on a bit of soft silicone, so it doesn't have to stop it coming out, just has to stop it flooding.
Does it not then sort of underwash the other hop containers?
Well, yeah, possibly. It's this is why there's a couple of end gaskets. Let me dig them out and I'll put the links up.
I'm going to look up that word, Ken, underwash.
Yeah, I just made that up. Thanks.
Nice one.
Like a deep clean mark.
I mean, you've got to give John Gregory some credit here, because recently, I know recently he's been brewing a heck of a lot. Like, whether it was to prove or disprove his containers, but he's been brewing a lot lately, and according to his comments, he's making great beers. So, and yeah.
Fair play.
Yeah, no, fair play to the guy, and fair play to him to organise this equipment and everything else for everyone. I just hope it works for you. It might do. I've missed the boat on it, but yeah.
I was certainly like Clive. I mean, I was quite interested when I seen his first concept. But the minute he came back with a compromised version, I thought, nah, no way. So, I mean, rightly or wrongly, I mean, it might work perfectly well. I mean, nobody can criticise it until it's tried.
Yeah. I think if so long as you could fudge it to get a couple of hop additions, yeah, that would work for me.
Clive, how far did you get with the silicone mold version with 3D print?
Right.
Or whatever they're called, because in some ways that, to me, that sounds like a really repeatable way of producing it with very little kind of machining if you're just molding liquid silicone.
Okay, again, if you look on the PicoBrew Facebook website, I'll see if I can find the link, and I'll either give it to Lee or someone to post up on the LAB forum or whatever you use. But if you go on there, someone made a pink, it stands out like Mole, it's a pink silicone hop carrier, basically. And all they did was just do this, 3D print this off, buy the silicone and mix up the silicone. The only trouble is mixing up silicone, you get air, obviously, when you mix up silicone. And you might only have a 30-minute window of using and pouring that silicone. So it's probably better to use a vacuum chamber to take the air out of the mixed up profile for when you go and pour it. I have got a vacuum chamber somewhere that I could probably adapt to do the test. But if you could buy a kit of silicone for £50 and get 3 hop carriers out of it, is a cheap option to do. And I think the tear value of them is about 60, so they're quite flexible, but they're stiff enough to do the job of the hop container within the PicoBrew. There is another guy that I know, Mike. He has made up a silicone one, but I haven't been able to get hold of him. But he made his up using a different method. The same guy, Mike, as well, has made up one out of a polycarbonate sheet by the looks of it, which is only maybe 1 or 2 mil thick, and he's bent it and he's riveted it together to make a hop carrier, which looks a fairly neat way of doing things. So there's plenty of people out there trying to make different hop carriers. It's just getting a method for all that's cheap enough for all and is achievable. But
have you given up on the silicone one, or?
Sorry, say it again.
Have you given up on that silicone one? Are you?
I haven't given up.
Now.
I've got so many other brewing projects on the go. It's unbelievable. Haven't given up yet. I will probably try it. But as well as the silicone, you've got to buy a mold release agent. Otherwise, the silicone's going to start sticking, and it's going to be a bit of a pain to get the silicone out of the mold. I did think about making even one out of Corian plastic and making a mold out of that, or a timber one and just screwing it together, and it's an easier release. But I haven't got around to doing that yet. No, too many other brewing projects on the go and not enough time, I'm afraid.